Welcome back, Lorcana players. It's Poisonous. Our new deck, Blurple Crush, has been killing it on Pixelborn Connect. I laddered up quickly this season, and I wanted to share with you my deck list and how it matches up in the current meta as it's unfolding. As always, I appreciate your likes, comments, and if you could subscribe to support the channel, that'd be great. Let's take a look at the deck list. Our deck runs 11 1-drops, so it's got good low to the ground action. We have 4 Chernobog's followers and 4 of the new Diablo. I think that the new Diablo works better than Magic Broom in this deck, so I've replaced Magic Broom. We're also running 3 Befuddles to help bounce opposing characters in the early game or bounce our snake later in the game. We also have our ramp package. Our ramp package is a lot more consistent this set now that we have Tipo and Sail the Azurite Sea. We don't need to rely on uninkable cards for our ramp, and we don't have to run a song like One Jump Ahead, which can be picked out of our hand by Ursula, so that's made the deck feel a lot smoother and easier to play. We have our usual bounce package with Fox and Snake, and we have our gain lore package with Goat and the White Rose as a new addition there. We have the Crab, which synergizes with a lot of our characters, allowing favorable trades. The new Genie card is incredible, so we're running 4 copies of him. He's replaced almost all the rabbits, although I did add a rabbit back in to give some additional card draw, but he's a evasive that quests for 2 for health. You can play him on turn 3 if you ramp on turn 2, so he's incredibly strong, and I think he's what makes this deck as good as it is. We also run 4 of the Elsa, which was probably the best purple card from last set. We have Baymax as a way to gain lore and heal up our characters because this is a challenge based deck. A lot of our trades and board control comes through challenging, so he's there to gain lore and keep our characters alive. We're also running 3 of the Big Donald Duck that inks a card off the top of your deck. He's quite strong because he quests for 2, he's inkable, and he's pretty survivable, so ramping up, playing Genie on 3 and playing him on 4, getting all the way to 6 ink can be quite strong. And then we have our large character package of Hades and Elsa. Hades is our spot removal. He does give the opponent an ink, but it's very powerful to be able to just remove characters on the opposing side, and it's not too hard for us to consistently get up to 7 and 8 ink to play Hades and the big Elsa. Elsa can also shift off the smaller Elsa on curve because you play little Elsa on 5 and her on 6, which is quite strong. And then lastly, we have Friends. Friends is such a good draw card that you just can't not include it. So this is the deck list. The link's also in the description for the video if you want to go and check it out. So let's take a look at some of the important interactions of this deck. The first interaction that I want to highlight is with Sail the Azurite Sea. This is an awesome turn 2 play because it lets you ramp an additional card, you draw a card, and the ink that you get is not exerted, which is the most important part because it lets you play another 1-drop on turn 2. So you go turn 1 Chernobog, turn 2 Sail, draw, ink an extra card, and then play another 1-drop. So you can play another Chernobog, Diablo, or you can befuddle your opponent's 1-drop or 2-drop that they've played, and that can get you a big tempo gain along with ramping you up to 3 ink at the end of the turn, so you can play a 4-drop on the next turn. So I just wanted to point out Sail the Azurite Sea gives you that unexerted ink. There's times where it's useful just as a card draw, but there's lots of times where you can use that extra ink to play something that costs 1 more than you would have otherwise been able to while ramping. The next important interaction in this deck is with Crab. Crab is a 4-of because he's extremely versatile in a challenge deck. A couple of the main things that I want to show you. One is Crab plus Diablo. You have your Diablo on board. A lot of times your opponent is ignoring it because it doesn't pose much of a threat and they don't want to kill it and give you a card draw and take away some of their tempo. But it gives you the opportunity to use Crab to power up Diablo and trade into a bigger character and get a card draw. Another interaction with Crab is with Elsa. This works really well if you have a Crab already in play from a previous turn and you need to kill something big. You can play Elsa, you can exert one of their characters that Crab can trade into, and then power up your Elsa to kill something or trade into something big. I really like this turn. I've played against green purple a few times where they have a bonsai on board that's not exerted, and then they have maybe one of their Elsas on board that is exerted. You play play Elsa, you exert their bonsai, Crab trades, which is a great trade, removing a 2-quester, and then Elsa's powered up and can take out their Elsa. Our next important interaction is using Baymax. So Baymax has an effect that when you play him and when he quests, he can remove up to 2 damage from another character of yours, and you gain 1 lore for each 1 damage removed. This means that when you play him, you could potentially be gaining 2 lore, and when you quest with him, you could potentially gain 2 lore. Our deck has a lot of 1-questing characters like Elsa, the crab, snake, fox, things like that. So when you are trying to close out the game, those characters do it quite slowly, but it can actually be advantageous for you to challenge other characters with your 1-questers, take them out, gaining us, a tempo gain, and then when you quest with Baymax, he heals them, potentially gaining 2 lore, so you actually gain more lore by challenging your Elsa and her getting damaged than you would if you had just quested her, and you get the benefit of removing an opposing character. So he poses a big threat that the opponent usually can't ignore, and they'll end up doing whatever they can to remove him because his lore gain gets out of control the longer he sits on the board. So he quests for 2, but in reality maybe he actually quests for 4 a lot of the time, so he's quite strong. And the other thing is we're seeing a lot of Go-Go Tamago in the meta with the green decks. So a couple of our big characters with a lot of health like Elsa, the big Elsa, and Hades, they're looking at trying to gain 3, 4, 5 lore potentially with Go-Go. So you can use your Baymax to try and keep them healed down to a lower number. That way they're not as easily able to gain those big lore swings with Go-Go when they're trying to close out the game. Our last interaction, and this one is pretty obvious for anyone who's played around the purple cards for a long time, is with Fox and Snake. So they're our bounce package. They let us return our characters and get more value out of them. So our first interaction is with our lore gaining characters with Goat and White Rose. You can bounce them, replay them, and gain additional lore. This is really useful in closing out the games in certain matchups. You can also do a card draw replay by bouncing your Rabbit, especially because he draws a card leaving and entering play. But you can also get additional card draw by replaying your Genie, which doesn't feel as good, but is still a viable option to get some card draw and ready your Genie, especially against evasive decks. And the other one is our 3 big characters. Replaying them is quite powerful. Playing Hades, removing a character, next turn being able to quest with him, then replay him and remove another character. You can end up kind of locking your opponent out. Same with big Elsa. You can keep replaying her to freeze and stall the game while you get back into it and edge your way towards victory if they're ahead. And of course you can bounce and replay Donald Duck to get lots of ramp off the top of your deck, so you don't have to lose your card advantage to keep ramping ahead. So it's important, I think, to recognize in each matchup which of those bounces is going to be the most useful towards getting to victory. It's going to depend on the situation and the deck that you're playing against, but it's a critical interaction to this deck. Of course, we also do have like a Fox Bounce Crab for location removal. I didn't include that on here, but that's also another very powerful one. Our 1-drops aren't as useful to bounce because the only thing you're doing is standing them up again to protect them. They don't get a lot of value on play. So you want to look at trying to save your characters that are useful for Fox and Snake to bounce. And the Crab is kind of a better choice to, get value out of your 1-drops if you're looking for something to interact with them. Now that we've looked at the important interactions for the deck, let's take a look at the opening hand idea for this deck. Ideally, this deck is going to be a ramp deck in the opening. So on turn 1, we want to play one of our 1-drops, Chernobogs or Diablo. These cards are great because they replace themselves with a card draw. On turn 2, we want to play our ramp card. We ideally want to play Sail, and then with the extra ink that we gain, play another 1-drop like Chernobog or Diablo, or even Befuddle can be extremely powerful. If they only play a turn 2 drop because they didn't have a turn 1, or they played an item on turn 1, for example, in like a blue deck, then bouncing their 2-drop can be a huge tempo gain and really set them behind while we're building up our board control by putting a big character on the next turn. So don't underestimate the power of Befuddle in the opening here. If we don't hit Sail, then we do have the option for Tipo. Sometimes Tipo Tipo can be preferable if you have some of your big on-inkables in hand, like you draw, a big Hades, big Elsa, or, if you have too many on-inkables, then the Tipo might actually be the better choice, because you can get rid of one of those cards out of your hand. With Sail, you can only ink another inkable card, which you may not be keen to keep getting rid of all your on-inkables in the opening. We've ramped on turn 2, then on turn 3 we can play our really powerful play, which is Genie Wish Fulfilled. He's a 4-cost, 2/4, quest for 2, he's evasive, so he's actually really great because he's hard for the opponent to remove unless they're running red, and he can trade into characters. If they play a Smee on 2 and quest with them, then the Genie can kill Smee, stay alive, and gain more value for you on the next turn, for example. We can also play Rabbit on turn 3. I think it's important to establish card draw with one of those two characters, so you want to definitely keep them in the mulligan. You want one or the other. And then on turn 4, we can play ideally Donald Duck, who's a big body character. He lets us ink off the top of our deck, so we get all the way up to 6 ink on turn 4, setting up for like a turn 5 Hades. The other character that I find great on turn 4 is Elsa. She lets you exert one of their characters, and you can use your other characters to potentially trade into it if that makes sense, or she can kill something small. She's really great against aggro decks. You get her out there early and then she can really beat up on them. This deck is pretty consistent in the opening because we have 8 cards that are inkable for our turn 2 ramp, and we have lots of good turn 3, turn 4 cards. If you don't get your Genie or Crab, you can still play things like Snake or Fox, 1-drop, replay the 1-drop. There are, some good value interactions there. You also have Goat or the White Rose to gain a lore and putting a decent sized body on the board. This deck is good. It only has 10 on inkables, so very rarely do you ever brick with this deck, which feels good. So let's jump in and we'll take a look at some gameplay on Pixelborn. So we're on the play. We start by inking Tipo and playing Chernobog's Followers. Our opponent inks the 1-drop Diablo, and they also play Chernobog's Followers. We ink Fox. We play Sail. This is definitely the best turn 2 play that we could have in this situation. We ink a 1-drop Diablo, and we play Befuddle, sending their Chernobog back to their hand. I opted to play this instead of the Diablo because I think that if they're playing purple, they're likely playing Bounce, and if they're hoping to snake the Chernobog back to their hand, it interrupts that. But it just gives us a bit of board advantage. They come back with 2 1-drops, but now that we're on 3 ink, we can go up to 4, and we can play the Genie Wish Fulfilled here. It's a very hard card for them to deal with. If they're playing red, they might be able to brawl him, but if not, then he has the possibility to stay on the board and gain a lot of lore. We quest our Chernobog, draw a card, and now they quest their Chernobog and do the same. I believe that they're digging for Brawl, because it turns out that they are playing red-purple. They obviously don't get it because they don't play it right away here. They quest their Diablo, knowing that we're not going to take it out with Genie, and they end up bouncing it back with Fox. Fox isn't really a threat to us because our character here is evasive. We do get Genie to sing. Friends on the other side, just trying to build up our card advantage a little bit. We ink, play Donald Duck, and ink another card, so now we're all the way up to 6 ink on turn 4. And we have a 2-quester with Donald and a 2-quester evasive with Genie. The opponent has their Mimfox sing, friends on the other side. They play Goat to gain a lore. This is okay with us. It's not a card that's really threatening our board position at all, so that's good. So we quest for 4 with our 2 characters. And now we're in a good position to be able to take advantage of the Donald Duck ramp. So we play Snake, pick up Donald, play him again, gaining another ink. So now we're really gaining an ink advantage, and our Donald is upright, so they can't challenge into it with the Goat or the Fox. Our opponent sings, friends on the other side with their Fox. Clearly they're trying to dig for answers to our board because they're also singing it with their Goat. They have a lot of cards in hand, trying to hit some removal to deal with our Genie. So they ink a crab. For 3, they did hit the brawl, so they get to take out Genie. And for 2, they play Cusco. So we're going to keep going with our same game plan of questing with our Donald and then bouncing him to replay him and gain more ink. The ink advantage will come in handy later for our big characters. We trade with the goat, so they can't do any bounce shenanigans with it to gain extra lore. And we quest with Snake. I could trade with the fox, but I think since we're ahead, I'd rather put them in the position to have to trade into us. Our opponent plays a rabbit. Again, they're drawing a lot of cards, obviously looking for answers. At this point, I'm sure they're trying to hit 7 ink so they can do B prep on us if we build up a big board here. They quest with the fox instead of trading with Snake. They ink play another Cusco. And then they quest with Cusco. We take out their Cusco, puts a damage on Snake, setting up for our next play. We're going to play Baymax. We're going to heal that damage and gain 1 lore. Ideally, we would have been able to take 2 damage if their rabbit was exerted, and we would have been able to gain 2 lore there, but 1 is still good. It's essentially the same as Snake questing, but instead we also got rid of 1 of their bodies off the board, which is good. We quest out, we play Chernabog, and we ink a crab, pushing us up to 10 ink. At this point, the opponent's finally able to get at our Donald. The opponent quests with rabbit, and then they play another fox, bouncing the rabbit back to hand to get some extra card draw. The fox trades with Donald. They brawl Baymax. Baymax is a pretty big threat to ignore and leave on the board, so they're good to remove him here. They play Chernabog, and then they quest with Cusco. And I think at this point they realize that we're getting kind of far ahead, so they do trade the fox into the snake. So we quest with Chernabog and draw. We want to see all of our cards before we make a plan about what we want to play. We play a Genie for 2, Snake, bounce him, and for 4, replay him. So essentially we played 2 cards and drew 2 cards this turn. And now they have to deal with another Genie on the board. They quest out their Chernabog, draw a card, and they replay the rabbit to draw. Our board's not very big, so it's not tempting them into playing that B prep that I'm sure they have at this point. So they snake, bounce, rabbit, draw again. And then they play 2 magic brooms. They're not very far behind us on lore, so we need to make sure that we're mindful of that as we push ahead here. We quest out to 16, play a goat to 17. The goat adds nice pressure because even when they potentially B prep next turn, we still gain a lore. We play Elsa, and we kill one of the brooms, which takes away a lore as well as a possible card draw from them. And then for our last ink, we play a Diablo. I don't mind playing him into a potential B prep here because he's going to replace himself with what's most likely going to be a better card. So the opponent quests with their broom. They run their Cusco into Snake to draw another card. They're obviously digging for answers here. They must have hit an answer because they quest out with Snake, and then they play the B prep, allowing us to gain a lore and draw a card. They didn't have they didn't want to trigger their Broom and lose that character. They ink and then they play Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom to gain 2 lore. At this point, we do have game. We had a goat in hand, and with the extra card draw, we were able to hit a fox, and now we have goat bounce to win the game. So you can see this deck is quite fast if it hits its stride with ink, and on the play especially, it can be hard to keep up with for other purple decks. Our opponent did seem to take quite a while to find answers for some of our cards, and we were able to just continually push the tempo using our bounce with the Donald. Thanks for watching my video. Hope you like the deck. As always, please like and subscribe. Have a great day.